Welcome everyone to another episode of Frogcast where we have combo convos about all things combo, Amazonian medicine. And today I have a wonderful guest, Lewis Powell. He's from Liverpool in the UK. And Lewis is, he's based in the UK. He's also the founder of the Kambo Practitioner Alliance, Inner Guru, and the Shamanic Healing School, Neosh. And his work sits at the intersection of psychology, healing, and indigenous knowledge, with a focus on understanding the deeper causes of human suffering and why people remain stuck in patterns. After spending time with the Matses tribe in the Amazon, he's developed close connections with the community, including elders who were present at first contact with the outside world, which is incredible. He's now documenting their history through oral testimony, challenging common misrepresentations, and bringing forward a more accurate account in his upcoming book that we'll talk a little bit about. And alongside this, he also works with researchers and Kambo practitioners exploring emerging areas of Kambo science, contributing to a clearer understanding of its safety and physiological effects. Wow, that's quite a bio, Lewis, and touches on a lot of things that excite me and that I feel very passionate about. And I'm really excited to talk more with you about your experience with Matses communities, and just kind of where the field of Kambo is evolving into. So, first off, thank you so much, Lewis, for coming on the show and talking with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I always am so curious how people ended up where they are today. So what brought you into this space with this medicine, with this work?
Believe it or not, I actually got introduced to Kambo at a retreat in Portugal, which is in Europe. So it wasn't like traditional, like ending up in the Amazon rainforest and stumbling across, indigenous tribes and having frog medicine. It was actually in Europe the very first time that I did it. I was on a retreat doing like ayahuasca and San Pedro and other plant medicines. And it was there that I met people that were doing Kambo training. There's an association called IAKP. They were doing like a Kambo training there. It was like the first ever training that they did in Europe. And that was, yeah, it was in 2014. And yeah, and I wasn't really that interested, to be honest, in Kambo. To be honest, I'd never really heard of it before. I'd heard of it through the grapevine, but not like I didn't know anybody that had ever tried it before. And when I was first told about it, just being sick into a bucket and that was it. I didn't really find it that interesting at the time until I did it. And I actually did it 3 times at that retreat. And I found that it just gave me this like instant clarity and like direction in my life that none of the other medicines quite kind of like got me onto. It was Kambo that really set me on the path. And it was actually a few people that I knew back at home who done Kambo as well for the first time after I'd been introduced to it. And it massively changed their life. And I just seen it just like working miracles with people throughout my community. And then it was then that I decided that this is what I needed to do. I was at a bit of a crossroads in my life at the time, coming out of like, employment and things and like I had a little bit of money behind me from a redundancy payout. So it was kind of like this transition. And then as soon as I was introduced to Kambo, I knew that that's what I needed to do. And yeah, and the rest is history. I could be here all day talking about the whole story, but I'm sure we've got other things to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I find that so many people that are really passionate about this work, had these deeply personal experiences with Kambo that led them to just being like absolutely devotional to, providing that safe space for others and pioneering the field at large. Because I will say this space desperately needs grounded leadership. So it's good to see people that have really kind of walked the walk, stepping into these positions where they can guide and support others in the community and, steward the respectful and responsible expansion of this medicine in the global enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's needed so much as well. Like recently we got like ITV, which is like the local like TV station, got in touch with us. Well, it's not a local actually, it's in the UK, it's a national TV station and they approached me recently, concerned about the rise in use of Kambo, but not concerned about people like us. It's more like concerned about these TikTokers who are, like celebrities. There's a lot of celebrities in the UK that are taking Kambo and then they're like uploading it onto TikTok and Instagram and they were
Oh,
genuinely concerned
interesting.
about genuinely concerned about the safety. And I agreed as well. I said it is concerning. I think they said what they actually liked about my online presence is the promotion of the safety, and the same as yours. Like, I really like the way that you emphasize safety. I think it's something that's really important. I think people like us really do need to be pioneers of that and fly the flag.
Yeah, because we could always lose access to Kambo. We're very lucky that currently it's unregulated in most parts of the world, and we need to be responsible if we want to keep it that way. And yeah, I think, education is probably the biggest antidote to risk and ignorance. And it's also a big part of why I'm excited to talk to you because along with safety information, there's also so much misinformation about indigenous roots and origins of Kambo, and a lot of romanticization and a lot of kind of blending of these different indigenous sects and groups. And just kind of throwing them all into one basket and being like, oh, the tribes or the indigenous do this, when actually it's so much more nuance than that. And you spend a lot of time with the Matses, and really have gone much deeper than most other people with learning their culture and spending time with them, getting to know them. So I would love to hear about, how you became connected to the Matses communities that you work with, and, how has that journey unfolded for you and led you to where you are now with leading groups there and working with reciprocity?
Well, it actually started because, well, I was doing like dietas in Peru and Iquitos, and I like made a few contacts, met a few people out there. There was a few people who like messaged me on Facebook and said they were Matsis, and there's all these different like connections that were coming also from IAKP. I was once a part of that association back in the day, and they had some connections with some people. But then I made friends with Urbano, and he is actually his father was one of the first people um, to move away from their original settlements. He was like one of the founders and original chiefs of Puerto Cayo, which is like not that far. It's like 10 kilometers from their original place, the place where they used to live before all of the riverside settlements was called Matied Shuni, and that was like it was like just an area like inland, and they had like communal longhouses, but they would kind of move from place to place slightly. They were quite nomadic, but they didn't have like settlements as they are now. And his dad was like one of the first people to do that. So like it was really nice for him to like share that with us. And then he invited me for years to go. It took me a good few years to sort of like build up that trust and think, do I really want to go there? Is he legit? But he was a really good connection for Kambo medicine as well. And it was after getting to know him and getting to know actually his origins, because when he told us where they actually live and like how far it was to get there, and I just didn't think that it was possible. And I'd heard through the grapevine as well, like general consensus in the Kambo community that you couldn't go there. That's kind of what I believed, and it wasn't until he was like, no, we can go. We just need to get these government permissions, and we can go. And yeah, a friend of mine was actually in Iquitos, and he was like, I really, really want to go and see the frogs. I really, really want to go. And then Abano said, why don't you come over? And then we go. Like, there was two of us that went, which was, yeah, an incredible experience, and just so enriching to be able to go and spend time with these people who don't get visitors, to be honest. The communities that we go to, Puerto Alegre is it was like it was when was Puerto Alegre created? It was in the early 90s, when Puerto Alegre was created. I think it was like the third or the fourth community They started off as a community on the river when they met the missionaries in 1969. On the 30th of August 1969, they made first contact, first peaceful contact. And then after then, the missionaries like set up like a camp near the riverside so they could like make contact and help them with like speaking Spanish and supplies and things like that. And then that became like the first settlement. And then after then, like you're talking like 10, 15 years after, then they started to um, like expand a little bit more. And it was Abano's dad, Abel. He was a part of a small group that decided to move away from the missionaries. And then because they were concerned about their culture being diluted with the missionary contact because they brought in obviously Christianity and things like that into their culture. And then they moved to Puerto Cayo. And then after that, it was Puerto Alegre. And Puerto Alegre is where the elders that were part of that first contact, that's where they still live now. So that's where we go to when when we go and visit, which is a beautiful experience.
Wow, yeah, there's so much rich history just even in the last 50 years, like since their contact. And I don't know if people really realize how recently the Matses were actually in contact with the outside world. It's not that long ago. And, I think it wasn't even that long ago that they had some, interesting practices like cannibalism and things like that. And I also find it interesting if you ask different Matses communities
Mm,
about their origin stories, either with Kambo or their first contact. I find some variations in the stories, and
yeah.
that's why it's so important to like have what you're doing, like to have someone actually like listen to the stories and document them because there's not clay tablets or really any written history of a lot of indigenous tribes. And so it's very much word of mouth, and it's probably a bit like telephone, where over time there's different versions that are born in different storytelling styles. So I'm really curious to hear from you, what you've learned from the communities that you work with, what their sort of like contact history was like, or a pre-contact as well, because I've heard some wild stories about, them shooting arrows at planes and planes dropping supplies and kidnapping a Matse's child so that they could learn the language. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what you've learned from your group of Matses.
Yeah. So, well, the people who made the first contact, there was four of them. There was Americo Dunu. There was um, Marcus Bina and Salomon Dunu and Americo Dunu. There was four of them, and they were the ones that made the first contact. And at the time, they were unified. There was only one community at that point. So their history told from them is unified. There's no discrepancy in the history that they told. But the thing is that what happened on that contact day is that the tribe disbanded. What happened is that there was only them four, and there was seven children that stayed, and they were the ones that initiated the contact. The rest, some of them went off to Brazil, some of them went further up the river. And what happened is there was a bit of a split in
Mm.
in the tribe at that time because of they were just afraid, to be honest. They overwhelmingly tell the story of how afraid they were when they first seen the plane. Now the thing is that what they are upset about really is the fact that there is there's documentation out there that's not true according to them. And the cannibalism thing, they say that that's not true.
Mm.
They talk about the napalm bombings, the Matsis massacre, and it's just overwhelmingly between the people who are still surviving from that day say that that's just not true.
Interesting.
The first time that they ever seen a plane was on the 29th of August 1969. Before that, they said that they'd never seen a plane. They even go on to say that that's why the others were so scared. That's why everyone was so scared, because they'd never seen a plane before. Now, what they do say is that they did have conflict with loggers. They did have conflict with, they call them mestizos, people that were in their land, with bows and arrows. But um, it wasn't anything to do with napalm bombings or planes and things like that. There was militia that they come into contact with, but it was like like when they were like perhaps out hunting, because what they did do, and this is something that they will admit to, is that they did go to different um, tribal areas and steal women as like a survival thing. But you look at anthropological history over the whole world. Tribal communities have always done that. It's like a survival thing. They have to for successful reproduction. So they do admit that that's what they did, and they did kidnap women. There was a woman that was kidnapped from not far from Pucallpa who was part of the translation of the missionaries that made that first contact, because they began to learn some of the words that she'd learned. One of them was Dacuenda, which is "do not be afraid." So when they were flying over the 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 area on the 29th of August, they were able to project, with like a loudspeaker, that word. So the people that made that first contact, they were only teenagers at the time, but they picked it up and they were like, this is something not to be afraid of. And they did drop items. They say that is true. Items were dropped like machetes, sharpening tools, food parcels, and things like that. And then it was on the 30th of August that they um, seen the plane come back again, and then they decided to follow it. So they walked like a good 10 kilometers to just on the edge of the Yacarena, where the people, the missionaries had set up a little camp. And then they went, and there's four of them, four of the brave men, and they went there and initiated that contact. But from then on, there was no violence at all between them and other tribes, and they overwhelmingly share that. But what they're upset about is the fact that nobody's ever contacted them to get oral testimony. It's just like second and third hand accounts. There was anthropological work that was done by people like David Fleck, who's very renowned anthropologist who also linguistic. I think he documented a lot about their language, but the thing is that the communities that were kind of branched off, who were a little bit further away from the original settlements, they kind of already mixed with like mestizos, and like the culture was already starting to be kind of a little bit mixed, and their story and their account of it wasn't the same as the people who made the first contact, because well, they weren't there at the first contact, and then things kind of get skewed a little bit. But this isn't me trying to say that anybody's wrong. But what I'm doing, like in the book that's coming out, which will be soon, in fact, probably by the time this is out, it'll be ready to buy on Amazon. But
Yay.
it's just about documenting. Obviously using all of the references from like anthropological work, and that's coherent, and that also aligns with what their first hand oral testimony is. And I feel like spending time with these people, and they're getting to an age now where this could be actually be the last time that anybody ever has a chance to speak to them, and to get that original history. Because what there is, like you said, there's no tablets, there's no like inscribings or books anywhere. And I think that it's only fair that they get their voice heard. And that's what the book's all about, really. It's about just documenting what they've said from first-hand account about that first contact.
Wow. That is so incredibly important. And yeah, I guess I just feel so grateful to you that you've prioritized making that happen, because yeah, it does feel like such a precious opportunity to, really hear what their history is, as we move into a more globalized, rapidly modernizing world where their culture is changing, everyone's culture is changing, but
Mm.
including, these remote Amazonian villages, they're changing too. It's also wild to me as well because some of the things that you shared now contradict things that I've been told directly by Matses who live in the reserve territory. So not even like second, third hand, that I
Mm,
saw on the internet, things that they told me specifically, like some small differences, like, they claimed that a child was kidnapped and that's how they learned how to speak certain Matses phrases, to say, don't be afraid. I also heard
yeah.
that they had sent about 10 planes prior to actually making on the ground contact where they would drop supplies like over and over. I heard that the Matses would shoot arrows at these planes and they would call them ghost arrows. Heard about I had Matses, like young Matses people that are in their 30s tell me about practices where they would actually eat the genitals of their spouse when they died. So it's so hard to know what's true, and that's, why I think getting multiple perspectives is really important because then you can kind of start to piece together your own beliefs and what makes sense. Um, and like I said, I've found that different Matses communities, because they are quite fragmented at this point, and there's
Mm,
a lot of
yeah.
political tension amongst them, unfortunately. But yeah, that's why it's so important for like things like your book to exist, to share, the stories of the community that you're working with, because it might actually be more accurate than stories that I've heard from other communities. And it's just so hard to know like who's right, who's not. And I don't know if it even really matters. It's more important that the voices are heard, like you said,
Yeah.
so that we can, really take that information into account when we are, working with these communities to support them and their cultural preservation and their livelihood so that their culture isn't lost in the globalization of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Another thing actually that in documentation, like, throughout the last 20, 30 years, and this is what I found during my research on it, is that the term Mayaruna was used as like a broad term. Actually going back into before contact, Mayaruna was a term that was used to describe any of the tribal people in that, the whole area. And there's quite
Mm,
a few. There's the Maruba, there's the Matisse, there's the Mashubo. There's lots of different pockets of tribes. Some of these aren't even existing anymore. But at the time, there was different tribes in that area, not in the specific area, but you're talking over like 100 square kilometers area. But the term Mayaruna was used to describe any of them. And like there's these reports of napalm bombings and things like that, which more than likely did happen somewhere, but it was documented and that it happened to Matsy's people. But the thing is that um, that term kind of morphed into Matsy's after the contact, if that makes sense. So then
mhm.
like documentation after that was then written, on top of that, and then that's how things got skewed. So that's kind of like one of the main discrepancies that they want to um, try to realign back into the truth. Now, the stories that that you mentioned, well, they might very well be true. It might just be something that they didn't want to, share. Well, we don't know for sure, but one thing that I found about the village that we go to visit is that there is a purity there, and I really like how the community encourages the Matsis culture, and how they want to continue that, and also having Matsis as their first language, and also how they pass on that knowledge of the medicines as well. It's really beautiful to go and receive Kambo from the youngsters. there's like two youngsters, Mariana and Mariana, and they're just beautiful. Like they've been working with Kambo for like they're like 26 years old, working with it for longer than I have, and like they do their own little practices as well. Like he was telling me that he did a 30-day Kambo like dieta. Like you done Kambo for 30 days, and then I was like, oh, is this like traditional culture? And they were like, no, it's just something that he decided to do. But back on what you said at the beginning of the podcast about romanticization of practice and things like that. One thing that I found, and you probably found that yourself, is that um, no, there is very little ritual when it comes to doing Kambo out there, or akate as they call it. Um, and I think that it is interesting, and also we have to kind of like be mindful of like generalizing how Kambo is administered in a way that kind of fits into our culture. I think that I think that it's important for people to share the truth, even if it's like kind of killing people's fantasies of how it should be. I think I think that the truth is always something that we should strive to share.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you. And yeah, there is this like idea that there's this traditional shamanic, history with Kambo, and that's just not really true. But it doesn't mean that we can't adapt our own spiritual practices to Kambo. I think that's totally okay. I
Mm.
don't think that is appropriation or bastardization of a practice. I think it is just like the evolution and translation of a practice to be relevant and appropriate for modern context. So I'm all about adding ceremonial elements to modern Kambo
Yeah,
sessions. I think it's great. I think there's a lot of value. But yeah, I think it's also important that people realize that that's not how it's done in the jungle, and that's okay. Like
yeah,
we can use discernment to decide like which aspects of traditional application have wisdom that we would like to include, and which parts are maybe outdated or irrelevant due to different contexts. Um, so
sure.
yeah, I think dogma is an enemy of innovation and adaptation, and it doesn't mean dishonor the origins, but I think we need to consciously update things as society changes and life changes around the entire world.
Absolutely. One thing that I actually really like about the way that the Matsis work is, and in their spirituality and their methods of healing, is the simplicity of it. There's nothing too complex. Like, we've sat there in the Maloka night after night asking questions, and everyone's dreams are being blown apart by the answers. It's like so simple. But there was actually a really interesting thing that we discovered on the last trip, is that we were introduced to a new medicine, a brand new medicine that like the medicine man Sabio had discovered, and it's like an eye medicine as well. It's like a bit like, I wouldn't say it was the same as Sananga, but it's applied to the inside of the eye. But they use like this. It's a leaf, and they poke it, like sharply poke it on the inside of your eyelid, and it was the most blissful, incredible experience that I've ever had of
Wow.
anything that I've put in my eyes before. I'll tell you that. And obviously questions come up about that, like how did you discover this? They said it was new, like recently, like last couple of years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and they explained that it's new. They
Oh,
they 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 said that they find all of their new medicines through working with Nunu. Like Nunu is like their connection to the ancestors and to the forest, and it guides them to where they need to go. And I really like that. I just love how connected they are to that medicine. It's
wow. And look at them. They're continuing to innovate within their own traditional frameworks as well, which is also evidence that innovation is not necessarily a bad thing. It's like it's still part of their culture that they're exploring the jungle and trying out these different things and developing. How cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. There was a couple of medicines that I tried when I was there last year that had never experienced before or never heard of.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
I
Well,
can't
I
wait.
get you. Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say you're coming, so
Yeah, that's gonna
yeah,
be fun.
yeah,
So
that'd be
one
cool.
question I have, because there's so much misinformation and difference of opinion about the the origins of Kambo in general. And you're also talking a little bit about how there's basically these like colonizer names that have been applied to certain indigenous groups, and they're not necessarily accurate. And some other examples I can think of are like how, the colonizers would call the Noki Koi Katukina. That's actually, the Noki Koi call themselves Noki Koi, but
Mm-hmm.
the white people called them, or maybe that's not white people, maybe Peruvians.
Brazilians. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The Spanish, I guess, called them, Katukina. And so I had always heard that, yeah, my Aruna was, I guess I hadn't always heard, recently came to understand that that was more of a colonial term that was then applied, and it makes sense based on how you described it. So regarding the origins of Kambo, because I've read in like multiple books, which I don't put any weight at all because none of these people have actually spent time in the jungle. And I think that there's this common misunderstanding or assumption that the Matses were like the first to use Kambo medicine. And from my experience in interacting and asking Matses communities about this is just the first thing from the truth. They're actually one of the younger groups to use Kambo. About 300 years ago, they were introduced by another tribe. So I've heard multiple versions of this story, even from the same community that I interact with over the years. But recently, they kind of blew my mind by sharing with me their origin story with the Marubo, which you mentioned briefly, and how they actually, the Marubo were kind of the original keepers, not even the Nokikwe Katukina, like I had previously heard as well. And the legend of Kampu, I haven't been able to figure out like who is Kampu? Where does he come from? What lineage is he from? So allegedly, from the recent accounts of this story, the Matses went to the Marubo settlement and they were given nasal combo. So according to this story, nasal administration was one of the original forms of application. And then somehow that translated later to transdermal burning, superficial burns on the skin. So I take everything with a grain of salt. I'm so
Yeah.
curious if you have any experience or stories that you've gathered from them about, their origin stories of how they came to interact with Kambo medicine.
It's interesting, yeah, that these different stories. Obviously, these are questions that we've asked as well, and they seem to want to just share that they've always done it. The elders that from that village, they say that they told us some stories about the Marubo though, because actually a lot of the Matsis in this day have Marubo origin, and the reason is because, well, the Marubo were probably one of the one of the closer tribes to the Matsis, and there was Matsis were in constant conflict. They were warriors. They took over and completely eradicated many tribes over the years, and they were quite feared. And they actually told the story of when they tried to conquest the Marubos and the Marubo shamans, because they work with ayahuasca. They knew that they were coming, and they waited on the top of like the hillside, so they could pick them off when they were on the way, and they knew that the Matsis were coming, and they picked them off one by one. And they all agreed. They were telling the story. All of the elders that were there were talking about this. So this is quite um, an overwhelming story that's accepted by that community, particularly the elders there. They share about that. But then what happened is, the reason they went there is because they were looking for women. Um, and there was a time after that where they had some kind of like almost like exchange where they could kind of mingle. And then so a lot of the Sabio is the he's like the medicine man of Puerto Alegre. He is actually his mother was Marubo, and he's actually got all, so the songs he knows all of the he's the only, well, according to them, he's the only Matsy's elder that knows all of the Marubo songs and all of the Matsy songs. And like there's like the apprentices and his son who's an apprentice, and one of the teachers, Lucio, is in the process of learning these songs. But in regards to Kambo and actually nasal Kambo, it was something that we asked about, and they said that that it's not something that they really did. They heard of people doing it, but they didn't do it. And that they like culturally they didn't do it, so they might have learnt it from there. But Sabio said that he did do it. He done it once when he was hunting when he was like before contact, and he just applied it into his nose, and he was telling us about that story. But then the other tribe people were going, like the younger ones were like, really, did you do that? Like, and he was like, yeah, I did it. But as far as the origins, I know that the Marubos do work with Kambo as well, so it's very possible that it could have come from someone else, but they are quite adamant that they have been working with it for as as long as their history goes. But the thing is that don't forget that the tribes, the Matsis tribe or the Marubo tribe, has never just been the Matsis tribe or the Marubo tribe. They've always intermingled. Like that's how they survived. They would steal from each other. They would fight with each other, and they would, you know, have women from different tribes. So there's bound to be some cross cultural things happening there, and who knows that, you know, exactly where it came from. But I have heard of that Kampu, and it was confirmed by a Matsy's member that we were with in the summer last year, that Kampu is does come from the Marubo.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. And yeah, it's like it's so hard to really know. And you know, even then, it's like their history goes back hundreds of years. So none of even the elders weren't alive when this was all going on. So it really is just like a game of telephone. And it's also hard to know because, people can manipulate information for their own benefit or to kind of create an image that they feel serves them. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in some communities, especially ones that are interacting with foreigners and gringos. I know one of the communities that I visit pretty regularly, they've totally gotten into nasal combo and they offer it to everyone that comes there. And I when I first started going there, that wasn't the case. And then that kind of evolved. And I almost feel like it could be a bit of like a marketing ploy of
Yeah.
like, oh, come do some like really intense stuff because they know that people just want more and more intense, novel, crazy jungle experiences. And that could have also maybe changed the origin stories. Because this was the first time, the last time I was there in September, the first time I was ever hearing about the Marubo from them and the nasal combo, and then them kind of insisting that this was actually the original method of how people were taking it. And I'm like, well, then how did everyone just end up doing burns then? Like it seems like the burning was quite universal as a strategy, and I had a hard time believing that it was always nasal, and then everyone independently figured out that burning was the best way. That seems a little hard to believe, but the cross-culture pollination sounds more accurate, and that it's maybe not as like clean cut as we might want it to be for our own simplicity and understanding. Uh, but yeah, it's all very fascinating, and there's very little information to really educate people on this. And even when you go straight to the source, like I have, it's not always consistent, right? And it's hard to know what's, how it actually unfolded. And but it's interesting.
It is interesting, but the thing is that originally there was only the very first Matsy's community was called Buenas Lomas Antigua, the very first one, and that was where the missionaries came and helped them to set up the riverside settlements. Before that, they didn't have riverside settlements. That was the very first community. And then after that, there was Puerto Cayo. And then after that, then some people stayed with the missionaries, and then some of them moved up further north towards Angamos and mixed with Peruvian people, and then more and more communities further up towards Angamos. Over. I mean, some of them are quite recent. The Javari River up that way, and but the ones that were in Puerto Cayo, Buenos Lomas Antigua, and Puerto Alegre, they're like the ones that are quite deep. They all practice Kambo in the same way, in that, in the way
Mm.
with the strings and the extraction and the points, and they've always done it for women on across the navel. They're like just
Mhm.
underneath the navel for women, and for men either across the chest or on the arm, and that's kind of like universal around there. And then when I asked that question about the nasal camo to the ones that have practiced in that same way, they say they don't do it like that. And they didn't know when Sabio the elder said, "Oh, I did it like that once." They all looked at him like he was like, "Really?" They actually didn't even know, and he was like, "Yeah, yeah." And they were like impressed that he did it. They were like, "Wow, that's like crazy." So it's not
Yeah.
like it's not a work. It's 100% not like a cultural thing to do that nasal combo. It's not something that's a part of their tradition. I asked that question, and it was quite universally
Yeah.
the answer that they don't do that. So, and that's the correct. I actually said about that, and they said, "Oh, it'll be the people who are, um, like closer to Iquitos or setting up communities than further
Hmm.
afield who are like, adapting the culture to please
Hmm.
visitors."
Yeah, I think that's a very possible reality, and that's kind of where my intuition has gone of like
Mm.
questioning like how accurate that is to the culture at large. And I think it's also really neat that you're asking these questions to the elders because it could be that the young people aren't, right? And so they're actually learning more about their elders because you're kind of excavating this information in their presence. And so it's also hard to say like how much cultural transmission is not taking place simply because modern young people are busy or distracted or disinterested or don't even know to ask these questions.
Yeah, that is a real issue as well. To be honest, that continuity of their culture, which is really nice in Puerto Alegre, and I'd say over the last few years of visiting, it's improved every year. It's almost like our visit, because we're the only people that go there. Really, they have some visits from like Acate, the charity, that go there and do some work. They're doing great work there, by the way. I just want to say that they're
Mm.
doing fantastic work for conservation and projects there, teaching them about farming and permaculture and things like that. It's fantastic, teaching the youngsters about it. But there is a problem with the children. Obviously they want to play football, and which is not a problem, but they are interested in sort of like what's going on in the outside, and not particularly as interested in the culture, but they've been trying hard to keep that going. So they commemorate their first contact every year on the 30th of August, and it's the biggest thing that they do all year, like as far as a celebration goes. And the whole community get involved in that, which I think is beautiful. But what I've noticed over the last few years is that each year since we've been visiting and taking part in that, they've put a bit more effort in each year. And like the children are like really, they look forward to us going, and their preparations taking like the whole week before we go, and like we get involved in the children preparing for it, and they're excited about it now because it's like because someone else is interested in it. I think that it,
Hmm.
it does reignite it. So people have asked, do you think that it's a good idea? It's a valid question. Is it a good idea to visit people who are so self-sustained in that way, as a way to not dilute or pollute their culture? But actually, what I've seen is that since we've been visiting there, that actually their culture is getting stronger, and it's something that they're more they're very proud of, and and the teachers who work with us when we go there, they're very focused, and they're like, in the 30s, early 40s, and they're very focused on that continuity aspect of the culture, just bringing in more and more projects, and like teaching them in school about, the medicines and the forest, and farming and agriculture and sustainability and things like that. So I think that it's beautiful. It was sad a couple of years ago to know that they got the Starlink put in there,
Mm, mm.
but they've got rid of it, which
Oh,
is, yeah. So for the
interesting.
last 2 years they haven't had it, which is,
Yeah,
I'm
I've
kind of
definitely.
I am glad that that's not there.
Yeah, one of the communities I go to a lot, they also have a Starlink now, and I really kind of discouraged them from getting it, but it can be really tricky to have these interactions with indigenous communities that have been so isolated for so long, because it's like you come in as a foreigner or gringo or outsider, and you might have this desire for their culture and their traditions to persist in a certain way. But at the end of the day, it's like they're people too, and they they don't want to get left behind by the modernization of the world. And I think it is the human condition to, want more and more and more once you see what's possible to have. And so, yeah, they want iPhones, they want internet, they want Nikes, they want the comforts of living. So yeah, every year I go to the village and see how it changes. It used to be that you like took a dump in a hole in the ground, and now there's like a toilet, and then next time there's a tile floor, and there's like walls. It's like an actual building, and there's no plumbing, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, I think it brings up like an interesting question, and really invites us to be mindful about how we interact with these communities, because certainly our interactions can be influential, and that can have certain consequences that are either positive or negative. Like you said, it can actually reinvigorate their interest in their own culture and bring them resources that help them feel more supported to sustain their own culture. But it can also create, an illusion of the grass is greener, and then maybe young people want to leave their villages because they want to go to the big city. They want to, explore all the offerings of modern life. And I don't think that there is a right or wrong way either
Hmm.
way. And I think that we have to just accept that change is inevitable, and there's always going to be a ripple out consequence to every action and interaction, and there's really nothing that we can do to stop that. The best thing that we can do, I think, is support them so that they make their own decisions about how they want to move forward with their communities and their culture and their lifestyle. Because it really isn't up to us to micromanage. I mean, that's a bit of what the missionaries did. They're like, well, we'll support you on these conditions that you adopt our doctrine or beliefs. And I don't know that I agree with that personally. I think, we just need to show up and be their allies and let them hold the reins to their own future, because it's ultimately should be up to them how they evolve their life or not, in response to participating in a highly connected, technologically advancing world society.
Yeah, I totally agree. What I actually like about the community and how it's set up, I was very impressed actually with their governance and how they manage things. So they have like an election every 2 years. I don't know if you're aware of it. The Junta Directiva, they it's like the government of the Matsis, and yeah, every year each community can vote to whoever their elected leader is going to be. The last 2 years, the last two um, times they've had an election, Leo Chumba is been given the position of High Chief, and his father was a chief in Buenos Lomas, Antigua, one of the first the first settlements, and he's from Puerto Alegre, and he's very much liked in that community. I don't know whether the other communities are so you know as supportive of that. I don't know the politics, to be honest, of other communities because I've only visited the one. Um, but what I do like is the fact that they do have that representation, and also as well that they're not stopped from going. If they want to go to into a Kitos and study, they can go and do college, they can go and do university. They even have a doctor. There's a Nazis member that's actually a
Wow.
qualified doctor. So they have that option to go out. Even Abano, I mean, that's his nickname, Abano, because he went out into the city and he lives in Iquitos, and he's got a family there. He's got his own little farm, and and he goes home and visits every couple of weeks, and I think that it's good that they are able to adapt, but it's also it's also helpful that they are so remote, because if all of the tribal communities that were living closer to like Pucallpa or Iquitos have been completely westernized in the way that they need things. I
Mhm.
do see that from Matsi's members who emigrate out of the villages. It's like the money kind of thing. They are on the ask quite a lot for things, and but the people who live in the village are you know one of my concerns was being there and like them just begging for money and asking for money, like in Iquitos, walking around. Everyone wants to get the money off you,
Yeah.
selling you like boar teeth as jaguar teeth and things like that, but it's actually not like that there. It's so chilled, so like people just get on with their life. The women get up in the morning, they're coming back with the plantains on the back, the men are out hunting, and I just love how they've still got that like self-sufficiency there. But there is also there's also they do struggle with some things, and that's why I think it's important that the youngsters still can have that option to go out and learn things, because ultimately, you know, they are going to go out and learn things that's going to help to sustain their culture. It might be through learning medicine, it might be through learning agriculture, or
Mhm.
anything really. I think it's a good system. Like, and I'm really like pleased that the way things are going. But like you said, we can't micromanage things, and if they decided to up and leave and go and move to the city, there's not really much we could do about it. But it's nice to be able to go to a village where a community, a tribal community, where they are so self-sustained in that way, how they can literally, they have everything that they need, really, apart from like healthcare. It's probably the only thing really that they struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's clearly not as black and white as I think a lot of people think it to be. It's complicated, it's messy, it's nuanced, like everything in life, but
Yeah,
sometimes that's a bit unsexy for people to
yeah,
acknowledge or even like contemplate because it adds chaos to their understanding of indigenous culture, which then requires like critical thinking to kind of find peace with it, which I find critical thinking is not people's favorite. So
no, 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 definitely not.
So I could talk all day about Matse's culture, and luckily we'll have lots of time to drop in and learn more. But I do want to transition to kind of like fast forward from the origins of Kambo to the cutting edge of what's happening today, because I know you've been sort of participating in a research project that sounds really fascinating. So, would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I had a case study. Well, it was a client of mine that had some miraculous healing with her illness, and she had that on an article online, and then these researchers from France got in touch. I'm not going to mention the names of anything just yet. It's all a little bit fresh in the making, but you know how I'm talking about. But yeah, so they approached me and they just asked me. if I would be open to getting in touch with this particular client because her case linked to the research that was taking place. And then I was like, okay, can we have a meeting about it and find out some more information? And yeah, so they got in touch and told me all about the research that was taking place, which is pretty groundbreaking to do with Kambo, because it is the very first bit of research that's been done on Kambo as a whole, as a secretion, which I think is just you probably share the same sentiment. Like the fact that research is being done on Kambo, not just the peptides, is fantastic. But they've made some really, really, really exciting discoveries with its treatment for a certain type of blood conditions. But I'm not going to go too much into that. But what I can say, is that the research has become pretty conclusive. That Kambo is very, very, very supportive for these conditions, and that they are looking for case studies, obviously, to then take that research to ethics boards and show that that there's people out there that are taking Kambo that are also sharing the same stories. Give us the permission. Phase 1 clinical trials. Let's go. That's kind of like the next step. But one of the most interesting things that I think you'd probably be interested in, that I can share, is that they've discovered the LD50 of Kambo, which is incredible. They're using Kambo secretion as a whole, coming from off a Kambo stick. They're dissolving it in water, and they're administering it subcutaneously in a very controlled way. And they've been able to find out that the LD50 of Kambo is very safe.
Wow. So
Very safe.
not everyone probably knows what LD50 is. Can you explain
Yes.
that?
So it means that in 50% of the trials that they do, that particular dose would kill whatever it is, the subject, whether that be like a rat or a human. Obviously, it's not on humans, but they can pretty much, if the LD50 on rats is high, then it's most likely that it will be high for humans as well. So basically, it's the lethal dose. And they have been able to show that in 50% of the subjects, it kills them at that dose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they have to do that before, as you probably know, and they have to do that before they do any kind of testing. Like experiment, like research on like more of the animals. They work on 1 or 2, and then they find out obviously what that dose is.
Yeah.
And it's significantly high.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. When you compare it to probably other available pharmaceutical drugs that are on the market, it's like cannabis, right? Or like psilocybin. It's like, yeah, the
Yeah.
LD50 is like very, very high on things like that, where,
Yeah.
I think you'd have to eat like, 3 pounds of cannabis for it to kill, like you said, 50% of people that would eat that much. So unlikely that that would actually happen in a scenario. But yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we kind of wrap up, how can people learn more about you and your offerings and what you're up to? You offer jungle excursions, trainings, shamanic teaching, Kambo sessions, I'm sure. And then your book is coming out, and then maybe people have a case report. How can people find you and get in touch with you?
So people can get in touch with me on Instagram if they want to, or through my website, lewis-powell.com. And yeah, you can send messages on there. I've got a few things coming up. So I'm doing I do a Kambo training a couple of times a year in the UK. And I also offer the trips, like you said. But we're getting to pretty much the full point now for the trip this year. But if you're interested in future years, you can get in touch. But yeah, and the case studies as well. If anybody knows anyone that's ever had any radical healing from Kambo when it comes to like things like blood conditions, then please, yeah, send that over. It's going to be great contribution to the research. I'm also doing like a 12-month initiation program because I'm also studying psychology at the minute. I'm in university doing a degree on psychology, and it's always been a passion of mine, to sort of blend like spirituality. It's not, I don't even really like that term, but like inner work, personal transformation, and offering like a 12-month program that's going to be focused on leadership. So it's a course focusing on like understanding energy, understanding holding space, understanding integrity, and also how to hold space safely. And that's a 12-month program that's starting in September. So yeah, that's what I've got going on. So quite a lot. My book's going to be out probably now on Amazon. It's called Matsy's First Contact, a historical account of first-hand testimony. And that should be available on Amazon, I'd imagine. It'll be there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have all this in the show notes as well so that the links are accessible. So I'll make sure that they have a link to the Amazon book once it's live. Well, thank you so much, Lewis. This was such a fun conversation, and gosh, we might have to just have another one at some point because I think you and I could probably talk for hours and hours and hours or days as we may discover. So, yeah, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your dedication and your integrity and just like all the realness that you contribute as being a transmission from the historical roots of Kambo and sharing that with the broader Kambo field as it expands. So thank you so much for your time, for your energy. Is there anything else that you would like to leave people with?
I just want to say as well, I've referenced your work as well in my book, so I'm looking forward to you reading it as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it, and I'm glad I'm in the US. I can actually order it on Amazon and have it delivered.
Great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Fantastic.
Lewis.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
All right. Thanks
Bye.
for tuning in, everybody. And yeah, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Follow us for more Kambo Convos where we talk about all thing Kambo. Thanks again.